Abyssal Murmurs. Hello, dear friends. Today I will share with you 13 scary, fascinating, and captivating horror stories. These are true stories that I have compiled, so let's dive right in. Story 1. My first encounter. Since I have some free time today, I've decided to share my personal first encounter with the supernatural. First off, I'm a Christian, and my family doesn't practice shamanism or any of the neej rituals. However, because of this incident, I gained a sixth sense, the ability to see ghosts. I can still remember everything that happened as clearly as if it were yesterday. This took place in Fresno, CA, and while I don't find the story particularly scary, I think it's quite interesting. This was sometime between 1998 and 2001, during the construction of Greenberg Elementary in Fresno. Now, onto the story. Around that time, my grandma had just moved into a gated brown apartment complex near Greenberg Elementary. I decided to sleep over for the first time to hang out with my uncles. It was a normal day. We played video games until we fell asleep. At the time, I had long hair that reached my chin, split in the middle, as was the trend. I was about 9 years old, and my uncle was around 14. The next morning, after waking up, I cleaned up and noticed my uncle had just finished his laundry. He asked me to help him fold the clothes so we could go out and play with our friends afterward. So, there we were, sitting on the bed. I was facing my uncle, with the closet behind him. He was facing me, the bed between us, and a bucket of clothes in the middle. The door leading to the hallway was behind him, off to the left from my view. As we were folding clothes, my aunt suddenly walked in slowly. She looked like she had just woken up, her long, messy hair hanging down to her chest. Her head was tilted forward, her hair covering most of her face. She appeared sluggish, with her arms swinging back and forth lazily. She was wearing a white pajama gown with purple polka dots, and her hair mostly covered her dirty face. She shuffled toward me in an awkward, slow manner. I even commented on how funny she looked. She came up behind me and sat on the bed. She started touching my head, running her fingers through my hair. I could feel her nails clawing at my scalp, almost as if she were petting me like a puppy. At first, it felt nice, but after a while, it became irritating. I started pushing her hands away, telling her to stop. I looked at her and repeated my request, but she just stared at me with those dirty, puffy eyes. I couldn't see her whole face, just her eyes and her filthy cheeks, but I was sure it was my aunt. Finally, I shoved her hand away and told her to stop again. She tried to touch my face, but I turned back to the clothes and continued folding. My aunt slowly stood up, kissed my cheek, and walked back out into the hallway. Her kiss left my cheek wet, and I could smell her bad morning breath. I swear, it even felt like she licked my cheek after pecking me. I reacted, "W, gross." My uncle responded, saying, "My hung name Koje Ruam Los? Are you stupid?" Me, huh? Auntie was messing with my hair, and it was annoying. She didn't even brush her teeth before kissing me. Without a word, he grabbed me and led me into the living room, where he quickly turned on the PlayStation 1. But he couldn't sit still, pacing nervously. I was confused. We didn't even finish folding the laundry. Then he abruptly turned off the PlayStation and told me we were going out. We walked outside in silence, and the whole vibe made me feel like I was in trouble. As we neared his friend's house, he finally told me. We were the only ones there. How could it have been Auntie? I saw you talking to yourself and touching your hair. I didn't see anyone. That's when it hit me. Something wasn't right. We ran as fast as we could to his friend's house. We stayed there until my other uncle and aunt returned, and we told them everything. A few days later, my grandma admitted she had been experiencing the same thing being sat on in her sleep almost every night since moving into the apartment. Not long after, they moved out of that place and into a new home. Ever since that day, I've been gifted or cursed with the ability to see things others can't. Story 2. The Fever. My husband, Tom, loves to fish. He typically goes after largemouth bass, but for some reason, he's been obsessed with striped bass this year. Every morning, at around 4 a.m., Tom wakes up and heads to the aqueduct to fish. He stays there until he has to go to work, and sometimes he goes straight from fishing to his job. After work, he comes home, eats, and heads back to the aqueduct, often staying until 9 or 10 p.m. I keep telling him he's got striper fever. Recently, Tom hasn't been catching many fish. He says the aqueduct is too crowded with anglers, making it hard to catch anything. I suggested he stop going, but he insists on continuing. Sometimes, I wonder if I even have a husband anymore. On good days, he brings home 1 or 2 fish. On bad days, he gets nothing. When I asked why he doesn't switch back to largemouth bass, he replied, "You have to catch them while they're biting. This year's bite is a fluke, and who knows when it'll end." Largemouth bass will always be there. Determined to find a quieter spot, Tom set out on a Saturday morning and found a place near I-5 south of Kettleman called Utica. It was perfect for him. He caught a couple of fish there and thought he'd found his secret spot, returning every morning and evening. One night, things took a strange turn. Tom didn't come home until 4 a.m., and when he did, he went straight into the shower without a word. Curious, I went to check, but when I got to the bathroom, he wasn't there. Suddenly, I heard the garage door opening, and Tom pulled up into the driveway. Confused, I could have sworn I'd heard him in the shower. When he came inside, I asked, "Did you catch anything?" He looked pale and wet. Then he told me the story. While fishing at Utica that night, he heard the voice of a little kid across the bridge. At first, he ignored it, thinking someone might be nearby. But as darkness fell, the voice grew louder. He got spooked and crossed the bridge to investigate, but no one was there. No cars, no people. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up and a chill ran down his spine. Terrified, he crossed back, planning to leave. But just as he reached the other side, the fish started boiling in the water, so he cast his line. As he reeled in a good-sized fish, Tom noticed a little boy playing by the water's edge on the other side. He looked around for the boy's parents, but no one was there. When he looked back, the boy had vanished. A loud splash followed. He couldn't tell if it was the boy or a fish, but the boy was gone. He shined his headlamp across the water, searching for the boy, but saw nothing. Tom was scared but focused on reeling in his fish. After securing the fish, he went to his truck and grabbed a high-powered flashlight, shining it up and down the aqueduct in search of the boy. But the kid was nowhere to be found. As Tom untied his catch to head home, something pushed him into the water. The embankment was slick, and he couldn't get a foothold. Thankfully, he could swim, but the current was strong, pulling him toward the middle. After floating for about a mile, he finally grabbed onto a metal ladder. Soaking wet and unable to use his phone, Tom walked back to his truck in the dark. He still heard the boy's voice, but was too scared to investigate further. He had lost his fish and just wanted to get home. By the time he looked at the clock, it was 2 a.m. Exhausted and shaken, he came straight home, took a shower, and tried to sleep. For For several nights after, Tom suffered from fevers and chills, squirming in his sleep like he was having nightmares. My mother noticed and asked what was wrong. After hearing the story, she said Tom's spirit was lost, which was why he was sick. My mother, being of traditional beliefs, suggested a ritual to call his spirit back. But Tom, a Christian, refused, saying, "I don't believe in that." I went to Tom's family, and his father called a pastor and deacon to pray for him. Still, Tom didn't improve. Desperate, I begged Tom to let my mom perform the ritual, but he got angry, dismissing it as the flu or pneumonia. I was torn. I had always thought my mother's ritual would work, but I also doubted it. So, I asked my mom, would the ritual even work if Tom didn't believe in it? She said it might, but it depends on the person accepting and believing in the ritual. In the end, I decided to put my full faith in the prayers. I called the pastor and deacons back, and they prayed for Tom for several days. Slowly, he recovered, his fever breaking, and his appetite returning. I asked the pastor why I saw Tom in the shower before he actually arrived home. The pastor explained that sometimes the spirit beats the body home. Someone later told me that the reason Tom was so obsessed with fishing was that a spirit had been calling him back to the aqueduct. I guess that's what striper fever really is. Be careful when you're out fishing. There might be more than just fish out there. Story 3. You Hear It. By Anonymous. I'm a junior at university, and this year, my close friend and I moved into our new dorm. Her room was nice and clean, but mine was a disaster. It felt like a glorified walk-in closet, cramped and narrow, with a large window directly across from the door. The room was shaped like a rectangle, and the walls were this warm yellow, but they were a mess full of holes from the previous tenant and covered in sticky pad residue. The smell? It reeked of old, dirty sweat, like a guy had been living there without cleaning up. I tried my best to clean it up, but the place still felt off, like the room didn't want me there. I shrugged it off, figuring I'd only be there to sleep. During the day, I was out of the room by 7 a.m. and didn't think much about it. Now, I should mention I'm a Christian, and I pray regularly before bed. One night, I was getting ready for sleep. I locked the door, turned off the lights, and cracked the window for some fresh air. I got on my knees beside the bed, like I always do, and started to pray. But this time, something was different. Almost instantly, I felt really uncomfortable, like something was watching me. And this wasn't a normal feeling. I've prayed in my room back home, in previous dorms, everywhere, and it was always fine. But here, in this room, something wasn't right. The more I prayed, the more the unease grew. My heart was racing. My breaths were coming faster, and my prayers, normally calm and slow, became rushed, frantic, but I couldn't stop. I didn't want to stop. The darkness behind my closed eyes seemed to grow thicker, almost suffocating. And then I felt it, a deep, mocking laughter, echoing in my mind. It was like it knew I was scared. I was terrified, but I clung to Psalms 23, the verse I always say for strength and courage. I kept repeating it over and over in my head. When I finally said amen and opened my eyes, I scrambled to turn on the lights. The room looked the same, the ugly, damaged walls staring back at me, but something had definitely happened. I sat on the bed, still trying to process it, when there was a knock at the door. It was my roommate. She's Chinese and a shaman, and when I opened the door, I was so freaked out, I nearly burst into tears. She just looked at me like, what's going on? I told her everything. Then she said, "I heard a laugh earlier. That's why I came to check on you. Even now, I'm still living in that room. But after that night, I've found more courage to deal with whatever is in this place. It doesn't bother me as much anymore. P.S. My roommate says there's a little boy who roams the house, but honestly, I don't think the laughter was from him. Whatever it was something else." Story 4. When a crusty ghost called me for cash, and I ended up at Pizza Hut. So one day, the house phone rang, and rang, and rang. Like, seriously, I thought it was broken or something, so I finally picked up. I hit them with the classic hello, but instead of a voice, I got jingle bells and steel drums. My brain went, "Oh great, someone's doing a neeb and butt," dialed me. So I hung up like it was no big deal. Next day, same vibes, ching chang chang, king ping ping again. I'm like, not this again. So I hang up, but it rings immediately after. This time, I pick up again and hit them with the "lock your phone, bro." But then plot twist, a dude actually answers in Hung and says only you can save her. $2,000. Buy her body and soul. Excuse me, what? Did this man just offer me a ghost prostitute? I was like, nah man, I'm good. I'm a decent dude. Also, I'm in college, so I'm broke. So I hung up. Next day, guess who's back? But this time, it's a crying girl on the line, sounding super weak, like save me. It hurts. I'm cold. And I'm sitting here thinking, damn, 16 and already on the streets? So, obviously, I tell her the only logical thing, get a jacket. And I hung up. But of course, the phone rings again, and I'm ready to throw hands at this point. I answer, and the guy's back, singing some creepy hum QV texiage. Folk songs. Now I'm freaked out. So I yell, "Stop calling, fool!" I'm waiting on a Pizza Hut call, and my address is hard to find. But this guy isn't fazed. Keeps singing his spooky song. I'm like, "Yo, pimp, or whatever you are. You're going to jail, 'cause I got your number on caller ID, and I'm calling the cops on your terrorist ass." Total lie. My phone doesn't even have caller ID. I slam the phone down, but the QV texiage keeps playing from the speakers. I'm unplugging wires, panicking, and THE and the upstairs door slams shut. I'm like, nope, and hightail it to Pizza Hut to get my pepperoni. Later, when my parents get home, I tell them about the whole ghost call situation. They actually believe me and schedule a shaman for Saturday. It's Tuesday at this point, so they tell me not to answer the phone till the ritual. I set the phone to voicemail with one of those cheesy messages like, "We're not home. Leave a message," thinking I'm clever. Spoiler, I'm not. My voice is literally on the voicemail, so it's not fooling anyone, especially not a ghost. Now I'm extra mad because I'm supposed to get a call from 3M about a job paying $18 an hour, and here I am dodging ghost calls. Fast forward to Saturday. Shaman shows up, does his ooh-a-neeb thing, and drops this BOMB apparently. That girl was my past life lover. She tried to reincarnate me, broke some heaven rules, and ended up locked in ghost jail. Now I gotta send $2,000 worth of ghost money to free her. I'm like, bro, where am I gonna get $2? K. I can't even land a job. Shaman says the next time they call, I should apologize and say I'll send the money. Luckily, they never called back. Instead, the girl shows up in my dreams as a talking cat. Creepy, right? So I'm talking to Meowth like, "I'll send the money, okay?" Chill, because I lost that sweet $18 an hour gig. Guess where I ended up working? Yup, freaking Pizza Hut. The one that can never find my house. I spent almost a year slaving over their nasty pizzas to save $1,500, and my parents chipped in the rest. We folded a ton of paper money and burned it, and the shaman said my past life lover's soul is finally free. She's gonna reincarnate soon or whatever. Honestly, I felt pretty good about it. But real talk, kids don't work at Pizza Hut. Their pizza's trash. Even Sam's Club pizza is better. Just go to college so you don't have to deal with ghost pimps and crappy jobs. Story 5, all in one. This happened to my husband and me about 6-7 years ago. My husband's aunt, his mother's sister-in-law, had just passed away, and we attended her funeral. Everything seemed normal during the funeral, and afterward, we came home and went to bed. Later that night, my husband woke me up. He was scared, holding his sword in his arms. I asked him what was wrong, and he said he heard the sound of coins jingling and rubbing against our bedroom door from the hallway. We stayed up for a bit, but eventually fell asleep. A few hours later, I woke up to a strange creaking noise coming from the wall. I quickly woke my husband and told him what I heard. He brushed it off, saying it was probably nothing. But just as he said that, we heard the creaking again, followed by a loud thud hitting the ground. We looked at each other, realizing something was definitely going on. That wall connected to my in-laws' room, so my husband called them. It was 4 a.m. When my mother-in-law answered, my husband asked if they were asleep. They were, but then she told us they were spending the night at our Dablaw's, uncle-in-law's, house. Chills immediately ran down our spines. We tried to brush it off and went back to sleep. The next morning, my husband woke up early to get ready. I was still in bed with our 1-year-old, who was playing beside me. I was half asleep when suddenly I couldn't move. I knew instantly that I was being sat on. I forced one eye open and saw a dark figure looming over me. Terrified, I quickly closed my eyes again, but then I felt something crawling on me, starting at my feet and moving upward. I struggled desperately to move, and finally I was freed. It wasn't a dream. I could still hear my child playing nearby. Later, I told my husband what had happened, and we realized that we had been home alone the previous night. When my in-laws returned to prepare for the next funeral event, we told them everything. At first, they dismissed it, saying it was probably nothing. But later, my mother-in-law contacted one of my husband's sisters-in-law, who was a shaman, for help. I also called my aunt in Thailand, who was also a shaman, to see what was going on. It turned out that several things had been happening.
The jingling coins my husband heard came from some Hmong dolls my mother-in-law had.
We threw them away after that. The creaking on the wall was caused by little animal statues and charms my mother-in-law had bought from a tournament they wanted to be fed. We had to get a monk to come and remove them a week later. As for what sat on me, it turned out to be the spirit of my aunt who had passed away years ago. She was seeking help, and my aunt in Thailand told her to go to her own children instead of coming to me. After everything, my husband and I were too afraid to stay home that night, so we slept at his sister's apartment. The next morning, I had a dream in which a woman came to me, crying and apologizing. I knew immediately it was my aunt. I woke up quickly and didn't want to go back to sleep. As much as I loved my aunt, there wasn't much I could do for her at that time. I passed the message to her children, though I never found out if they did anything for her. Story 6. Dad's Nkauj Dragon Mistress. My father was like many dads in the 90s. In his mid-30s, he loved fishing, hunting, playing soccer at the park until sunset, and, of course, chatting with women. Back then, married men talking to women wasn't seen as a big deal. He was family-oriented, well-liked in the Hmong community, and especially respected by our family clan. In July '97, the clansmen organized a BBQ by a river in California. My father, a strong swimmer, crossed the river multiple times with my uncles. Everything seemed normal until we got home. At night, my father complained about a sore shoulder. When my mom went to massage it, she noticed 2 strange bite marks on his upper shoulder. The holes were the size of metal pellets, about inch deep. He assumed they were caused by drifting branches in the river, but the truth was more chilling. He'd been bitten by a Nkauj dragon mistress. Weird things started happening in October. The house phone rang every night between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m., but there was no one on the other end. I picked up several times, only to hear faint static, rushing water, and a woman's voice, though too faint to understand. My parents grew annoyed, thinking it was a phone company issue, so my mom began unplugging the phone before bed. At night, the sinks and bathtub would turn on by themselves, and the toilet would flush randomly even when you were sitting on it. My father's behavior also changed. Despite the chilly October nights, he made us bathe outside with him under the cold hose water. When my mother questioned him, he simply said, "It's too hot inside the house." What he didn't tell her was that every time he showered indoors, a woman's figure appeared in the bathroom with him. He could see her shadow through the shower curtain, and whenever he closed his eyes, her face would jump out at him. As Halloween passed, more unsettling things happened. My brother and I hid our candy in the closet to avoid my mom's strict candy rationing. One night, while we were sneaking candy in the closet, we saw a woman slowly emerge from the clothes and walk out of our room, heading towards my parents' room. We were too terrified to understand what was happening. A few nights later, I woke up to my brother pinching me. He was staring at the closet. I looked over and saw the clothes swaying gently. Suddenly, a woman's head appeared between the hangers. She pushed the clothes aside, crawled out, and looked at us before silently walking to the door. She motioned for us to be quiet with a finger to her lips and disappeared into our parents' room. Things escalated quickly. My mom found my baby brother, who slept between my parents, on the floor beside the bed every morning. My father revealed that the Nkauj would come at night, move my brother to the floor, and lie beside him. My brother and I had been seeing her emerge from the closet every night, but we were too scared to say anything. After a big shaman ceremony, the Nkauj, but it came at a cost. We moved away from that house, and life returned to normal. There's one more thing. Whenever she came out of the closet, she wasn't alone. She was always accompanied by me. Nuam Pab Natsu, little monster trolls, small hairy creatures that played in the closet all night. Story 7. No Hope to Live. By Anonymous. My uncle married a second wife, leaving my aunt heartbroken. My aunt was kind and friendly, loved by everyone except her husband. To clarify, this is my uncle, my dad's younger brother. Despite the heartache, my aunt would often tell people she had lost hope in love and had no reason to live, except for her commitment to her mother. She said she would continue living as long as her mom was still alive. 6 years ago, her mother fell ill and passed away. At the funeral, my aunt was devastated, mourning deeply. As the youngest child and the only remaining daughter, she was tasked with sitting next to the coffin throughout the service. On Sunday, during the ceremony, she sobbed and whispered into her mother's ear, "Mom, remember to come back for me." While she grieved, she held her mother's hand tightly. A chill ran down her spine when she felt her mother's hand lightly squeeze back. On Monday, her mother's burial day, she whispered the same words again, "Mom, come back for me." 2 months after the funeral, my aunt started feeling ill, beginning with what seemed like a minor cold. Her condition worsened, and she was eventually admitted to the hospital. Her eldest son stayed overnight with her. While dozing off on the sofa next to her hospital bed, he was startled by a whisper in his ear, a woman's voice softly calling his name. He woke up and glanced toward the bathroom, only to see the faint figure of a little girl with long hair walking beside the bed. She vanished near the foot of the bed. Following this eerie event, the family called in a shaman to perform a ritual. After the ceremony, the shaman warned the family to spend as much time with my aunt as possible, as he wasn't sure she would survive the night. The shaman explained that my aunt's mother had told him she didn't want to return, but her daughter, my aunt, kept calling her back. He revealed that my aunt's spirit had already begun the journey with her mother, dressed in monk clothes and holding an umbrella, walking hand in hand with her. No matter how many times the shaman called for her spirit to return, she continued walking with her mother, never once tilting her umbrella to look back. After the shaman shared this with the family, he left for the night. The next morning, my aunt passed away, leaving behind 2 daughters and 3 sons. At her funeral, we created an image of her and her mother holding hands, climbing the stairs to heaven together. My uncle, who had married the second wife, passed away from a heart attack 2 years ago, leaving his cruel second wife a widow. Story 8. The Bell. This isn't exactly a scary story, but it's something that stuck with me from a Thai horror movie I watched when I was a kid. It didn't just scare me, it made me feel sad too. My memory's a little fuzzy, so bear with me. Basically, the movie follows 4 college friends who, either because they were bored or for some kind of school project, decided to dive into ghost stories and urban legends. They began testing different superstitions to see if they were real stuff, like bending over and looking between their legs to spot spirits, whistling at night, or banging chopsticks against their bowls during dinner to summon ghosts. Obviously, things go sideways. One of the friends goes missing. The others notice when he stops showing up to class, so they head to his house to check in. His parents tell them that he's in a coma, his body's there, but no matter what they try, they can't wake him up. The friends, now feeling a mix of guilt and fear, decide to drop all the ghost hunting nonsense. They hoped their friend would wake up on his own, but he didn't. Eventually, the guilt weighed on them, and they couldn't shake the feeling that they were responsible. They started coming up with a plan to somehow bring their friend back. There were 4 of them, a couple, let's call them Anne and Rob, and their 2 other friends, Pete, the guy who got taken, and Betty. Anne, Rob, and Betty ended up finding an old witch doctor, someone rumored to know how to access the spirit world. They begged her for help, but she was reluctant. She'd lost too many people trying to do the same thing for others. After a lot of convincing, the old lady finally agreed, but she wouldn't be the one retrieving their friend. Instead, she would send Rob and Betty into the spirit world to get him themselves. Rob didn't want Anne to come, though. He loved her too much and didn't want to risk losing her, so he sent her home and told her parents to watch her, just in case she tried to do something reckless. Before Rob and Betty left, the old lady warned them they only had a couple of hours to find Pete. If they stayed any longer, they'd be trapped there forever. To bring them back, she would ring a special bell, a magic bell that would open a portal to return to their bodies. But they had to listen closely and act fast. The bell would ring 3 times, and they needed to jump through the portal on one of those rings. Any later, and other portals would open, leading to places they wouldn't want to go. In the spirit world, Rob and Betty eventually found Pete, but he didn't want to leave. He told them that he was failing in college and that his parents would be ashamed of him. He figured he was going to die one day anyway, so why not stay in a place where he had power, where he could fly, become a powerful ghost, and escape his miserable life? Rob and Betty tried to convince him, but he wouldn't budge. In the end, they told him they hoped he wouldn't regret it and wished him the best. They were ready to return and tell his parents he'd chosen to stay. Story 9. Why She Came. There she was, crouching in a childlike stance, her long black hair a tangled mess covering her face, obscuring any features. Yet, somehow, deep down, I knew exactly who she was, and my insides twisted into knots. She didn't need to speak. I knew why she had come. For as long as I could remember, my mother had been absent. She would vanish for days at a time. At first, only briefly, but then those absences stretched into weeks. And even when she was physically home, her mind was somewhere else, lost in her own world. At 8 years old, I could already see the distance growing between us. But I still clung to the hope that she would love me, yearned for that motherly tenderness, despite the warnings and the whispers. No matter how much I tried, she just couldn't return that love. As the years passed, little changed. My mother's absences continued, and her detachment remained. Then, one day, she was gone for good, passing away without warning, leaving behind more questions than answers, and a heap of unresolved resentment. Her funeral was a blur, and I went through the motions like a hollow shell, disconnected from everything. Despite everything, she was still my mother, and now I was motherless. 20 years have passed since then. I've built a life, started my own family. Things have been peaceful until recently. My 2-year-old started crying uncontrollably without any apparent reason. At first, I brushed it off. Kids cry, right? But then the strange things started happening. Objects moved on their own. Things went missing and reappeared. And soon enough, the disturbances grew worse, cupboards slamming, lights flickering, water turning on and off by itself. And all the while, my child's cries grew louder and more frequent. I had enough. One day, driven by frustration and anger, I yelled into the empty space, "Whoever you are, leave my child alone. If you want to hurt someone, come for me. I'm not scared." The moment those words left my mouth, I felt it, the hair on my neck rising, strands lifting as if someone was tugging at them. And then I heard it, a breath, warm against my ear, as though someone was whispering, though no one was near. That night, I dreamed of nothing but darkness. Yet, through the void, I could see faint, translucent beams of light like something out of Insidious. I knew I was dreaming, and like always, I tried to wake myself up before things got worse. But then I saw her, my mother. She was crouched in that same childlike pose, waiting, her head tilted to one side. One eye peeked through her curtain of hair, staring straight at me. I was frozen, unable to move or speak, consumed by a deep, soul-crushing dread unlike anything I had ever felt. What I heard next is something I will never forget. Her voice echoed in my head, so vividly, so real. "Well, For context, in my dream, we spoke Hmong, but I'll translate. I've been searching for you for a long time. And now, finally, you can hear me, she said. Mom, what do you want? You've been dead for years. Why are you here? Why torment my child and disturb our home like this? How can you not be ashamed of yourself? Her reply sent chills down my spine. It is time for you to accept your gift, to take what is rightfully yours. You see, my mother was a shaman. She performed rituals and ceremonies for others, often traveling far and wide to help people. It was believed that during one of these rituals, she encountered something dark, something she couldn't fight off. It latched onto her, drained her spirit, drove her to madness, and in the end, she took her own life. I don't want your gift, I told her. I will never accept it. If you had any love for me in life, leave me and my family alone. Her voice turned cold. What you refuse, I will pass on to your children. When they come of age, I will make sure they inherit it. And until then, I will be here. Every day, you will not escape me, no matter how hard you try. With that, I jolted awake, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. My child was screaming blood-curdling cries from across the hall. I glanced at the clock. It was 3 a.m., the dead hour. Story 10, Hiking and Camping. This took place in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California in 2017, early summer. A group of friends and I went backpacking, hiking and camping for 3 days and 2 nights. The first day as we hiked went okay. Nothing happened. On the second day, as we got up and got ready to hike to the final destination, which was another 3.5 miles, it was one of the most mind-boggling experiences that we've ever had. As we hiked 1 mile in, we passed by a few backpackers, who was a family of 3, a husband, wife, and their son, who looked about 13 years old. They were still packing up their campsite, so we just exchanged a few words and hiked on. About 5 minutes after we continued the hike, we saw a little girl W-I-T-H-O-U-T any shoes on, and her clothes were regular clothing, not hiking outdoor type clothing. She didn't pay attention to us as she was hiking down, which was the opposite way we were going, which was hiking up. It was as if we didn't exist to her or something, because she didn't give a little glance at all, and just kept hiking down. Our group didn't think much of it at first, and thought she may have been a part of the backpackers' group of family we passed by. My friend Travis, he is a white guy, and his brother, who tagged along with us on this trip, said the girl looked familiar and started to freak out a little. My other friend Justin suggested maybe we should go back and check on her just in case she was lost or something after a minute of hiking more. Yeah, stupid us. Should have done it at the first contact. It was a weird situation. One of those situations where you don't know exactly what to do, so you don't do anything. Anyways, we decided to hike back down and find her, but she was nowhere in sight. The family that we passed by was on their way hiking up towards us, so we asked them if they had a daughter who was supposed to be with them, and they said no. Then we asked if they saw a little girl coming down. They said no, and that was when we all started to get chills and started panicking. My friend Travis made the call to go back to the trailhead, where we parked our car and get to the nearest ranger station. We got back to the car, drove to a ranger station, and told them what just happened. We gave one of the ranger the name of our trailhead and explained exactly on a map of where we saw the little girl. One of the rangers pulled up a missing person case file with a picture and showed us. My friend Travis and his brother was an automatic shock and silence as they looked at the picture. The little girl we saw had been missing for a couple of months. She was last seen around the area when we initially first saw her hiking down. I won't go into details of where and when and who or what her name is to protect the identity and respect of the family. Once we confirmed that we really saw the little girl and said it was the same girl as the one in the missing person case picture the ranger showed us, the Sierra National Forest Service and rangers performed a massive search and rescue operation in area we were hiking in. 2 weeks later, they found her remains just 200 feet off trail near a small creek of where we initially saw her, or whatever it was we saw. This isn't the only weird or creepy part about this missing person case. A couple of months later, after the body was found, there was still no news media coverage or whatsoever of this incident. So my friend Travis decided to obtain an autopsy report of the case. The weird thing about the missing girl's cause of death was starvation. There were no signs of struggle of where her body was found, no signs of trauma or wound to her body, no signs that she was raped, murdered, or animal attacked. Nothing. So they just put the cause of her death was due to starvation since they couldn't find evidence of anything else. Her shoes were missing and her shirt and pants was not on her, but folded neatly beside her. The circumstance of when this little girl went missing was the parents and her siblings were hiking this trail with her when all of a sudden she disappeared. They stopped to take a picture for about 30 seconds, turned around, and she was no longer with them. It was like she just vanished into thin air. They called out her name, and you'd think she would be able to hear even if she went off trail for that short amount of time only. During the first week of that incident, when search and rescue performed an operation, they already searched the area she was found months later, numerous times already, and she wasn't there. I started doing research online about cases similar to hers, and I found out that there are over thousands of missing person cases similar to the little girl we came across in our national forests and parks. Unexplained disappearances, ruling out murder, rape, kidnapping, animal attack, etc. To this day, my friends and I wondered what we saw, and if it was her spirit or whatnot. It was so mind-boggling because I wasn't really a believer of such things. Story 11. Story in Laos. A long time ago, in Laos, there was a man named Yixiong who was married to Enkao Shilai, Moon Lady, the daughter of a shaman. They had tried for years to have a child, and though Yixiong considered taking a second wife, Nkao Healy refused. Desperate, they turned to her father for help, and through his powers, Nkao Shi soon became pregnant with a son, Muaje Mu. Lucky, when the child was born, Nkao Ji loved him deeply, as any mother would. For 4 years, they raised Muaje Mu together. He was rarely home, often out late into the night, courting other women. Some nights, he wouldn't come home at all. One day, Xiang returned and asked Nkao Li if he could marry another woman as his second wife. She refused, but Xiang begged and pleaded. After days of arguing, Xiang suggested that they leave Muaje Mu with her father while they searched for land to farm, thinking that Xiang might be serious about settling down. As they walked deeper into the woods, Nkao Ji asked, "Why do you want another wife when I've already given you a son?" Xiang said nothing, his face blank. She continued, "If this woman truly loves you, she can wait. Let her wait until our son is married, and I'll allow her to become your second wife without any trouble." By then, the sun had set and the woods were dark. Cao Jai turned to Xiang, only to see him smiling. I never needed your permission, Xiang said coldly. I was only informing you. The setting sun blinded Cao Jai, but before she could react, Xiang swung a harvesting hook knife at her. The next morning, it was raining when Xiang went to retrieve Mua Zhimu from his father-in-law's house. Weeks passed, and Xiang noticed that his son never asked about his missing mother. Curious, Xiang finally asked, I'm bringing you a new mother soon. She will love you, your old one did. But tell me, why haven't you asked about your mother? Don't you wonder where she's gone? The little boy looked up and replied, Daddy, Mommy didn't go anywhere. You've been carrying her on your back this whole time. Story 12, Story of 2018. A story that was sent to us back in 2018. This one is a good one to not reshare. I hope to never experience this ever again. Sorry for the long story. This happened at my previous house before moving out. My wife and I both work in offices, so our work hours are practically the same. We have 3 children, all under the age of 15. Each time we work, our babysitter would be here an hour before her shift starts. Our house is a split-level, updated house. Yes, we made sure there wasn't any crime committed or deaths during the years of the property. A peaceful, quiet neighborhood with friendly neighbors to add on top of that. Never once did we experience anything strange or out of the ordinary until our last week before purchasing another house and selling the one we were in. If my memory serves me right, this happened in 2016 at the end of October. A typical day of the wife and I coming home to our kids so we could relieve the babysitter of her duty. My wife cooked, the kids did their homework, and I was sitting in my office room working on some bills. Right before 8 p.m., slowly losing light outside, I slowly checked on the kids' homework and gathered everyone to the kitchen for dinner. Before getting to the kitchen, all the kids were in the bathrooms, washing their hands as they normally do. After watching the kids pack their homework away and wash their hands, we all walked to the kitchen for dinner. My wife, who I thought was setting up the dinner table, was out in our patio deck talking to her mother. I went ahead and set up the dinner table with plates and finished up cooking what she had started. It was about 9 p.m. was when I got everything done in preparation to eat. The kids sat at the table, and I knocked on our glass sliding door, giving hand gesture to tell the wife to eat. I couldn't see her, so I turned on the patio light outside. She turned around and nodded her head yes. So there we were eating without the wife. While I was eating, I periodically checked on my wife outside. From her body posture and hands covering her face, it looked as though she was crying. Right before I could get up to check on her, she stormed inside crying. I've never seen her like this before, so this is all new to me. I didn't know how to react, neither our kids. She ran downstairs to our second living space and sobbed on the sofa. I chased after her, asking her what was wrong. Each time I asked, she cried more and more. So after about 30 minutes of her crying, she finally told me what happened. Her aunt passed away. She was in her late 60s and cancer took her life. Fast forward to signing documents to our new home. On our last day at our old place, before renting it out to tenants, we took the kids out to have one last night at the old place before leaving for good. The house was completely empty, aside from the air mattresses that I bought for our last night there. After visiting the mall, we came home around 10 p.m. Exhausted and beat, we all went straight to sleep on the air mattresses. We all slept in one room, the master bedroom. That room is connected to the master bedroom. All the bathrooms have motion sensor lights because my kids would wake up at night and use the bathroom. It made it easier. I could remember this happening as if it was a few minutes ago. My wife and I couldn't sleep, but the kids were fast asleep. We stood up around 1 a.m., tired and exhausted, our eyes kind of dozed off. My wife softly said, "Hun, I'm going to try and sleep, okay?" I nodded to acknowledge her. A few minutes passed. She mumbled, "How are you, Auntie?" Of course. Instantly, I thought she was talking in her sleep, so I thought nothing of it. A few more minutes went by, and I felt hard breathing on my face. I opened my eyes, and my wife was sitting in a cross-legged position with her head leaning over inches from my face. I was freaked out and was a little jumpy but still remained calm. I asked her, "What are you doing, and why aren't you sleeping?" She stared dead into my eyes, laid back against the pillow, gave an evil smile, then turned her back against me to sleep. Around came 2 a.m.
I was very scared and couldn't sleep.
Still, so tired, I kept my eyes closed in hopes that I will somehow sleep. Trying really hard to sleep, I noticed the bathroom light was on.
I got up and checked the bathroom, thinking maybe it was a faulty or something. Happened a few times in the past.
I turned off the motion sensor, closed the bathroom door, and proceeded to the air mattress. We were next to our big bedroom window, and with the moonlight shining, you could somewhat see everything inside the bedroom. I saw the wife using a towel drying her hair. Right at that moment, just about every hair on my body stood up. My heart was racing, and my mind couldn't comprehend what I was seeing, if it was real or fake. I softly asked, "Why aren't you sleeping?" The response I got took my breath away. The wife said, "I'm going to be buried. I need to clean myself." Puzzled and scared, I called her mother since she was a shaman. At almost 3 a.m., surprisingly, her mother was still up. I told her to please come over. Something strange was happening to her daughter, and I didn't know what to do. I had explained everything to her, and she said to put her on speaker. So, I had her mother on speaker with the volume on max. Her mother sang some Hung ritual songs for a good few minutes. While that was going on, my wife staring at me with a smirk smile on her face. Drawn to her looking at me, I started to notice that her face features didn't look like my wife at all. That's when it hit me. From that second, my body just froze. That person was her aunt. Her eyes then focused away from me, pointing at the corner, yelling, "I'm coming for you. I'm coming for you," in Hong. She got up and in an instant was right in front of me. She opened her mouth, and I could hear multiple women crying, almost as if I was at a Hmong funeral. Keep in mind, this was at night happening in my bedroom. I've never been so terrified in my life. From there, she continued slowly walking to the corner while staring at me. She reached the corner and started crying, saying, "I will take you with me," in Hmong. From there on, I don't remember anything else. I woke up drenched in sweat with slight recollection of what had happened. My wife slept on the corner. That's where I found her. My kids still sound asleep. And over to my side, my wife's mother was there, and along with 2 bullhorns and the shaman mask. I had asked my mother-in-law what she was doing here and why my wife was at the corner. She explained that the person who my wife was on the phone with was the aunt who passed away. Her spirit took over her body, mother-in-law, and contacted my wife since they were very close. The aunt wasn't happy about her death, and that an evil spirit was coming after her before she had passed. So when she took possession of my wife's body, she was here to chase after the evil spirit and punish the spirit. Hearing this sent shocks through my spine. A few days later, I asked my wife if she remembered anything from that night. Her response was, "What are you talking about?" I was sleeping downstairs. I was like, "No, hun. You were sleeping beside me, and your aunt took possession of your body." She laughed at me, thinking I was being silly, and said, "No, babe. I had woke up in the middle of the night to shower, then slept downstairs because it was cooler." During that night, I guess she had taken some pictures of the stuff she had wrote on the floor, saying that she would miss this place and for the tenant to take care of the property. She showed me the pictures and also some video clips she recorded that night downstairs. Yes, so during that night, and also when I woke up, apparently it was the aunt who we saw clearly sleeping at the corner of our bedroom. Needless to say, we ended up selling the property after a few months to the tenants. We were able to make a deal with them. The property is in North Spall. Sorry for the long read, but thank you for taking the time to read my experience. I hope nothing like this happens to anyone, and I apologize for any misused words or spelling error. Story 13, Mysterious Story. This story is based on my true experience. When I was 7 or 8 years old, my family and I moved to St. Paul, MN from Fresno, CA. We lived with my grandparents for a year or two before moving into our first duplex. This house, located in Frogtown, was haunted. A few nights after we moved in, strange things started happening. The atmosphere felt different. We could hear dishes moving as if someone was touching them, toys being played with, and the TV turning on and off by itself. There were a couple of times when the TV would turn on, and my mom would turn it off or unplug it, but it would still come back on. One night, my 3 brothers slept upstairs in the attic. In the middle of the night, one of them woke up and saw a woman with long hair, dressed in white, standing by the window, watching them. He got scared and started screaming. A few nights later, my dad, who was sleeping near the attic, heard footsteps going up the stairs. He thought it was just one of my brothers, so he ignored it. About 30 minutes later, my brother passed by my dad. My dad asked, "Didn't you just go to your room, the attic, 30 minutes ago?" My brother said, "No, I didn't." My dad got a little freaked out, but didn't make much of it since he was a shaman. NOWTHPARTOFTOHESTOR. Why? A few months passed, and my older brother, Shilong, passed away. R.I.P. Shilong. A couple of nights before he died, there were a lot of bats and cats sitting on the roof of the house next door, all staring at our house. They stayed there for a couple of days. On the night he passed, I woke up feeling strange. I got up and heard footsteps outside, so I decided to look. When I looked out the window, I saw a tiger pacing back and forth. All of a sudden, it stopped and looked right at me. I got scared and went back to sleep. The next morning, my parents and I went to my cousin's house for a shaman ceremony, neej. While we were there, my aunt called and told us to go home because my brother had passed away. We rushed home, and when we arrived, there were a lot of people and police officers. I still remember everything vividly, especially how my brother looked lying quietly on the bed. A few nights later, I woke up and saw a figure. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, standing by the door of our bedroom, watching us. The figure was dressed all in black. I was terrified and screamed for my dad. When he woke up and asked what happened, I told him about the ghost at the door. He got up and placed a wooden sword by the door. Later that night, part of the ceiling fell near where my dad was sleeping. Luckily, he had moved, or it would have hit him. The next day, I told my mom about the tiger I saw the night my brother died. She asked why I didn't say anything earlier. If I had told them, they would have done a neej, a shaman ritual, and maybe my brother wouldn't have passed. But I was young and didn't know better at the time. My mom didn't believe me at first about the tiger. However, after my brother's funeral, when my mom and sister returned to the house to pack some things, they saw tiger footprints circling the house. That's when my mom finally believed I had seen the tiger. A few nights after that, either my mom or dad had a dream that my grandpa came and took my brother because he needed someone to help him with his farm and to stay with him. That's why he took my brother. THEEND. I know many of you might not believe my story, but this is my experience from the time of my brother's death and funeral. I've shared this story with many of my friends. Some believe it, and some don't, because tigers are usually seen in zoos, not in neighborhoods. But I really did see one that night. Thank you for taking the time to read my story. If you ever see something strange around you, always let an elder know what's going on. It could save you. Thank you for taking the time to listen. If you enjoyed the content, please give me a like and subscribe to the channel to support future videos. Wishing you all good health.